Have you ever run into a situation where you run a ton of ramp in your commander deck but still don't draw it? Well, I have a solution for you. Just run mana generation in the command zone. In this video, I'll list the top 10 commanders that function like mana rocks. You can find lots of mana advantage in the command zone, but this list will have a few parameters for inclusion. Firstly, mana must be generated, which means that commanders that reduce cost don't count. Commanders like Baral, Chief of Compliance, are more medallions than mana rocks. They don't actually generate the mana, they just reduce the amount you need to spend. Secondly, the mana generated can't be dependent on other cards or particular game actions. So something like Urza, which will make its own artifact 2-tap for mana, doesn't count because if you lose access to your artifacts, the mana generation is gone. To start, I have two honorable mentions. Well, one honorable mention and then a set of honorable mentions. Rada Erdekeld is a 2 mana value 2/2 Gruul commander that can tap for 1 green. When it attacks, you may add 2 red mana to your mana pool. Now I mention Rada here since she has the legendary can provide 2 mana on a 2 mana value body, making it about as close to Soul Ring in the command zone as you can get. However, that red mana can only be used at instant speed, as the mana will drain once you move from the combat step to the second main phase. And without that, it's just a signet creature, which is still fine, but nothing spectacular, not really anything to build around. The next honorable mention is the OG ramp commanders from Legends. Yep, that's right. Legends actually featured a good amount of mana generation in the command zone, with the caveat that they are all dog crap. I mean, look at these. Designers back then knew that ramp in the command zone would be powerful, so they decided to make their mana generating commanders wildly overpriced. However, I'm still wary of anyone showing up to battle with a Riven Turnbolt EDH deck. You just know that once turn 8 hits, shit will pop off. Anyways, enough talk about bad commanders that generate mana. Let's see the 10 best commanders that generate mana. Number 10 is Inga and Essika. Inga and Essika are a 4 mana value 4/4 Simic commander. It gives creatures you control vigilance, and you can tap them to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool to cast a creature spell. When you cast a creature spell, if you spent 3 or more mana from creatures on it, draw a card. Inga and Essika doesn't have a great mana value to mana production ratio, at least initially. It does take a bit to accrue a mass of creatures, to cast more creatures, and then draw boatloads of cards. Being in Simic makes this easier, but it's still an investment, which is why it's rated so low. One of my personal favorites, Nader Kraken, is great here, but so are mainstays like Avenger of Zendikar and Hornet Queen. Make sure to run some smaller token creature generation so that when Inga and Essika do come online, you are ready to go. Think of things like Aether Channeler and Scion Summoner. Number 9 is Roshin, Roaring Prophet. Roshin Roaring Prophet is a 4 mana value 4/4 Gruul commander. When it enters play, mill 6 cards. You can put a card with X in its mana cost from among those into your hand. You can then tap Roshin and reveal any number of cards with X in their mana cost from your hand. Add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool for each card revealed this way. Spend the mana only on costs that contain X. I know, this breaks my own rule that the commander needs to be guaranteed to make the mana without any other cards or effects. However, I think this one has potential to generate a lot of mana, which is why I included it. With the 1 card from itself mill, you're looking at a 4 mana value for 2 mana generated, which is not super great. But with just 1 more X card in your hand, you're looking at 4 mana value to generate 4 mana. Granted, you'll need to run a lot of X spells, but Gruul can easily facilitate that. For me, building Roshin is pretty simple. Go maximum Hydras and maximum catastrophic X damage spells that might end the game in a draw and ruin the evening for everyone. Number 8 is Giada Font of Hope. Giada Font of Hope is a 2 mana value 2/2 mono white commander. It has flying and vigilance, and each other angel you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it for each angel you already control. You can tap it to add 1 white mana, but you can only use that mana to cast an angel spell. Giada would probably be at the top of this list if she wasn't useful for just angels. Obviously, the counters part you would probably want to keep for just angels, but I kind of wish her mana ability covered a larger range of spells. Like, it would be pretty sweet if there were more kindred type spells, like an angel instant that saved a creature or something. Additionally, I like that you can get beats in with her and still use the mana. Call me old school, but I love swinging with 2/2s. For deck archetypes, I'm just gonna be honest, it's angels or nothing. I don't even have anything clever for it, just play angels. Ugh, now I feel dirty that I can't think of a clever deck for Giada, or a segue to number 7 on our list. Number 7 is Lavinia, Foil to Conspiracy. Lavinia Foil to Conspiracy is a 3 mana value 2/3 Azorius commander. It has vigilance, and whenever you cast your second spell each turn, Investigate. You can tap it to add 2 colorless mana, but only during your opponent's turn. Lavinia is the first of the 3 mana value for 2 mana generated, which I think is a pretty good target ratio for mana you want to create in the command zone. However, unlike other cards on this list, the mana ability only works on your opponent's turn, which isn't much of a hindrance if you plan around it. You can use that mana to activate artifacts or to make it easier to cast big instants like Cyclonic Rift. One of the upsides of Lavinia is that you have a pretty wide range of stuff that you can build around her with. You can go with her clue strategy and just use her mana to eat clues, or what I would probably do is go more with mostly creatures that have flash and big value gaining spells. This video is sponsored by me. That's right, Absolute Cardboard. If you enjoy this type of content, like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to further support videos like this, subscribe to my Patreon or become a member here on YouTube. I post videos early for members and we'll be having some behind the scenes and extended videos coming soon. If you don't want to do any of that, I still appreciate you spending your valuable time here, so thank you. And now back to the video. Number 6 is Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia. Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia is a 3 mana value 2/3 mono green commander. You can tap it to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, but only to cast creature spells or activate creature abilities. And whenever you cast a creature spell with a power 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on itself and untap it. Gwenna is great in a mono green big creatures deck, providing a colored Soul Ring effect, potentially many times a turn. And if your opponents are focusing on all the big creatures you're casting, Gwenna can eventually build itself up to be a sizable threat. Somewhat obviously, your primary deck types for Gwenna will be Stompy, big green dudes, and big green card draw. And you will want the big card draws because eventually, Gwenna will be machine gunning mana out like candy, and you want to make sure that you can spend all that candy mana on big green creatures. Number 5 is Catilda Dawnheart Prime. Catilda Dawnheart Prime is a 2 mana value 1/1 Selesnya commander. It has the super relevant Protection from Werewolves trait, but it also gives humans you control tap to add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors, and you can pay 6 mana to tap Catilda to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Catilda is in the 2 mana value for 1 mana generated Signet Zone, since she does give herself her mana ability. So at worst it's a Signet in the command zone, and once she's got everyone else making mana, she can start pumping out +1/+1 counters to all your creatures. Catilda will get even better if you have a lot of creatures who are either specifically humans or tangentially humans. For a while I toyed with the idea of making a Selesnya Legends deck, where most of the creatures were humans in addition to being there mostly for the legendary super type. Or you could just run regular humans and kindred enhancers like Coat of Arms, or you can be a giant jerk and run humans that are also stacks pieces like Draneth Magistrate, Sanctum Prelate, or Glow Rida, who as far as I can tell, has no relation to Flow Rida. Number 4 is Helga Skittish Seer. Helga Skittish Seer is a 3 mana value 1/3 Bant commander. When you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain a life, and put a +1/+1 counter on Helga. You can also tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is Helga's power. That mana can only be spent to cast creature cards with mana value 4 or greater, or creatures with X in their mana cost. Helga's really good, curving into a potential 5-drop on turn 4, but also getting a counter on herself, giving you a life and a card. Now the more you do it, the more you can cast, and since you can get Helga's passive ability to trigger more than once a turn, you can start chaining multiple 4-drops for multiple counters, multiple life, and multiple cards. It should be noted that you can increase Helga's power in other ways, either using other +1/+1 counter creators, or using stuff like auras, like Rancor and Audacity, to accelerate the generated mana even quicker. Number 3 is Troyan Gutsy Explorer. Troyan Gutsy Explorer is a 3 mana value 1/3 Simic commander. You can tap it to add Simic mana to your mana pool for spells with mana value 5 or greater, or spells with X in their costs. Or you could pay a blue mana and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. Troyan is probably the biggest surprise on this list, but it does curve out nicely. Turn 3 Troyan, and then on turn 4 you have 6 mana available for anything costing more than 5. And if you don't have anything, it also has a built-in loot ability, so you can dig for those big spells. Were I to build a Troyan deck, I think I would just go with big creatures all the time and use Karuga as a companion. I like Companion a lot, and I don't mind dipping my toes into 3 mana value ramp spells, which means Karuga is a natural fit for Troyan. As for the rest of the deck, it shouldn't be that hard to find spells with a mana value of 5 or more in Simic. Number 2 is Dalico's Crafter of Wonders. Dalico's Crafter of Wonders is a 3 mana value 2/4 Izzet commander. You can tap to add 2 colorless mana that can only be used to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. In addition, all equipped creatures you control have flying and haste. An Izzet Soul Ring in the command zone is wild. It makes a lot of your mana rocks free or really cheap, and you can build around it with lots of different archetypes. But I think the funniest would be Izzet Equipment, which is kind of a wild thing to say in 2025. The evasion and haste for your equipped creatures shouldn't be overlooked, as you can use itself to pay the equip cost to move your equipment to newly summoned creatures and get them attacking right away. I think leveraging the equip synergies that red can tap into with the artifact synergies that blue can tap into can make for a really fun and really powerful experience. Number 1 is Codsworth Handy Helper. Codsworth Handy Helper is a 3 mana value 2/3 mono white commander. It gives commanders you control Ward 2 and can be tapped for 2 white mana, which can only be spent to cast auras and/or enchantments. Additionally, it can tap to attach an aura or equipment you control to another creature you control. Codsworth is just outstanding. It hits the 2 mana generated for 3 mana value sweet spot and has additional value in the protection that comes from a ward. It also has a stellar ability to move around auras and equipments around for free. Obviously, being mono white hurts a bit, but white is one of the colors that works best with equipment and auras, so you're in good hands. I would lean more towards equipment. White has good spells that assist aura and equipment strategies, but white has just a few key cards for equipment like Bastille Shaper's Gift and Zamriel's Seraph of Steel. Additionally, I think equipment might be slightly better overall, since equipment can be moved around depending on your needs, and auras need other cards to do that type of thing. Codsworth also happens to be really good in the 99 of a lot of decks, like this Captain America deck that runs my number 1 and 2 commanders from the list. You equip big things, then you throw big things. It's a lot of fun. Which mana generating commander is your favorite? Was my list good, or did I miss a particular bomb? Let me know in the comments below, and until the next video, I'll see you around.